Ashley's sending some good advice. I can't read it. So thank you for bearing with us, everybody. We do have a good program for you this evening. As I said, first thing you need to know is I'm a technical idiot. And second thing, this is my first Facebook live broadcast for this evening. So we were trying to do it off of the Hamilton site, but for whatever reason, I wasn't able to hook up there this evening. We're set up here to do a Facebook to do a PowerPoint presentation for you. I'm going to take your questions as they come through the evening. Dave Belil, our chapter chairman, is going to correlate them and feed them to me here on Messenger, because right now I'm broadcasting on my phone and I'm not able to I've got people calling, I've got phone calls coming in, etc. right now. So your questions will get dealt with, and they'll come to me through Dave Belil. We'll collect them as we go through this, and I'll deal with them probably every 5 minutes, every 2 or 3 slides. So if you're just tuning in, I can see a lot of text flashing by on the screen from here. So I guess we've got a lot of people who are finding us. That's great. And I hope this works out well for all of us here this evening. This is, again, first time doing a broadcast down here, first time doing a Facebook Live. Any comments on how to do this better? Technical advice. I'm almost 60 years old. I don't want to learn anything new about technology, but you have to. And so I go into this kicking and screaming, but I go into it gratefully because, you know, I'm younger than the average age in Muskies, Canada, and as a club, this is what we need to learn to do going forward more and more and more, and to reach a bigger and bigger audience. So my hope today is that this goes well enough that maybe while we're all stuck in here through COVID, we can have some interesting conversations with some of the other Muskies Canada chapters together as well. So thanks for tuning in. Let me just click on a couple of lights over here. I'll be right back. Broadcasting live from my giant tackle box in the basement of my house in Orleans, Ontario. Most of you know me from being out at the Ottawa River Muskie factory about 45 minutes east of here, and I have a giant tackle box room out there too, because you can't have too much tackle, can you? So I hope you like it. I hope it looks okay, and let's have a good time together. It's a pleasure to do this event with the Hamilton chapter. I was supposed to be there last month giving a presentation. I was really looking forward to it because I was there 2 years earlier and I had such a good time with all the guys, and the response was great, and I know so many people from the chapter, and so I guess this is the next best thing. So thanks to Dave Belil for organizing this and having me, and I'll throw a shout out to 2 of your up and coming media superstars out of the Hamilton chapter. Brent Bocek. Brent's putting together a Muskie program for television this coming season, summer and fall. And we all know Brent from his seminar series and hosting all kinds of great live events on Facebook and elsewhere. A lot of the trade shows. And so kudos to you, Brent. Looking forward to that. And I'm going to throw a shout out to Frank and Chris at the Ugly Pike. I love watching the Ugly Pike get bigger and bigger. I think that concept of interviewing guides, people who've been around a long time, a lot of the storied people from the Muskie world, is just a phenomenal way for all of us to learn. So the Ugly Pike, if you want to go and listen to some really great podcasts, that library is growing bigger and bigger. It's a who's who of Muskie people to learn from, and the conversations get deep and don't always touch on Muskie stuff. So just fantastic stuff. So enough of Jews, and let's move into what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to talk to you about a few different things. My idea for this evening is a presentation. I don't even know what this looks like. I hope you can see it well on your screen. My presentation is called Fish That Tell Stories. So this will be a lot of pictures because I don't think text is coming across really well there. And it's basically the reasons why and all the learning that you should do for every fish that you catch and how that's going to help you going forward. So we will have a lot of pictures and not a lot of text this evening. And we'll try and make it interactive after I finish talking at you for a couple of minutes here. Program outline for this evening. If you've seen me talk before, you know that I always talk about behavior. And I talk about behavior basics, things that I've learned largely through Muskies Canada. I'm really grateful to be a part of Muskies Canada. I've been here, I don't know, somewhere around 25 years. And all the who's who, all the characters and all the eccentrics are in Muskies Canada. All the biologists, the great tackle makers, the volunteers, the people that you want to learn from and the people that you want to hang out with. And so I'm really grateful for all the learning I've done in the club. And I hope this is passing a little bit back. What I am is just a voice of experience. I'm somebody who started this really early and really young. And I have the same passion that most of you out there do, but you know, I've accumulated 45 hard years of doing this now, and so you do learn a few things along the way, and hopefully I can pass on just little pieces of information, because a lot of the guys in the Hamilton chapter are so good, they know it all. It's hard to tell a lot of you out there something new, and so the presentation tonight has some different facets to it and hopefully something for everybody. So behavior basics, and then we're going to go through the section called Fish That Tell Stories and the questions that you should ask and that you should ask when you catch a fish. We're also going to look at technology in the muskie world. You got to have it, plain and simple. It is changing year by year. Technology catches you fish. I told you at the start, I hate learning new technology, but it is a necessary evil, and the toys and the tricks that are out there now are just ramping up so much. And so you got to have them. I'm going to talk a bit about my experiences with the new Helix this past year, some changing technology in the muskie world, maybe ask a few questions about where it goes. Because as we get better at finding fish, we put a lot more pressure on them, and that has consequences. So we'll talk about that. I'll give you a quick update on the Save a Million Fish research project. I unveiled that in Hamilton, I think, 2 years ago. One of the first places I showed the video of how to use a carbonated beverage to save the life of a fish. SaveAMillionFish.com, and on Facebook. You can see our video. You can add your comments. You can tell your story, and we'll post the update. The latest research is not yet been published, but I do have a bit of news on the program. And finally, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the St. Lawrence River Muskies. If you're a Muskies Canada person, one of the great learning tools we have in Muskies Canada is our release journal. Peter Levick, you deserve kudos for so many things that you have done for our club, and taking our research journal to a whole new level, just professionalizing it in every way, and creating content that is meaningful to muskie people. The winter issue this year, the winter edition of the research journal, was mind-blowing. It was deeply disturbing. It's bothered me since I read it. And so if you didn't read it, which a lot of people don't, we're going to talk about some of the articles in there related to the situation on the St. Lawrence River. And I'll pass on what they... Hey, I can hear myself over here on this one. Wow. All right.
They see your slide backwards.
They see the slides backwards.
Yeah. Because, I mean, this is like a mirror effect.
Okay.
Pictures.
my program director, France Rioux, my whole support team is over there telling me what you're looking at. So if this doesn't make sense, That's okay. We'll have fish pictures, and a fish backwards looks as good as a fish forward. So my thank yous, just to finish, I thank you to Muskies Canada nationally. Thanks to Hamilton chapter of Muskies Canada. The presentation when I came to you guys, there's 6 people in Muskies in Hamilton chapter who caught beautiful big fish on our baits, our Muskie Factory baits last year. So I wanted to say kudos to them, and I think Andrew won your Hamilton chapter outing on one of our baits. So thanks a lot for all the support from you guys, and hopefully we take $2 from all of our Muskie Factory baits and put it into research, and more research needs to happen. We'll talk about that. Thanks to Shimano, as always. They're a big part of my life. Huge support, and I love being part of that team. Amazing people, amazing technology, and amazing technical development of reels and rods, etc. So I'll show you the skicks partway through this evening, and a new Shimano trolling reel that's got gears that makes your life easier. Thanks to Suick Lures. Been using Suicks forever. I just joined their pro staff here in Canada, along with Brent Bochak, who's listening this evening. Couldn't be happier. Couldn't be a more appropriate sponsor for me to have, because I probably had a Suick in my box at age 16, one of the first lures I would have had. Chaos Tackle, and let's move on from there. We have a prize table this evening. Every Muskies Canada event I've ever been to has a prize table, so we have to have one this evening. This is the Mona Lisa. This is a new bait that we just released this week. We did a limited run of it a short while ago. It's gold blades with our patented super tough custom baked black striping. A really fantastic combination of black, gold, and copper in a skirt. It's a one of a kind. This bait is for sale this evening for $45. If you want it, there's just one. First one, or anyone who writes in, the money goes to the Hamilton chapter for this evening. That's our prize table, and that's how we're going to do an auction for tonight. So I'll hang this up over here in case it takes a couple minutes to inspire somebody to send in on that. If you have any questions this evening, as I said, hopefully a lot of text flashing by on my phone. So to deal with your questions, send your texts in, and Dave Belil is going to send them to me every couple of minutes, and we'll answer a few then. If you have questions and I don't get them to them this evening, send me an email at gotmusky@gmail.com, and I'll answer your question in the next couple of days. Let me have a sip of my blueberry kale smoothie. Honest to God, that's what it is. And we'll get on with this. All right. If you've seen me talk before, I show this slide as one of the first things I do when I talk about behavior all the time, because a muskie is the biggest and baddest and fastest swimming fish in fresh water. And when we fish for it, we fish at crazy speeds. We troll at 5, 6, 7 miles an hour. We burn blades and bring baits in as fast as we can. And this fish defies that behavior. Most muskie guys fish fast for a fish that is the fastest swimming fish in fresh water. But in truth, one of the key behavioral characteristics of our muskies is that they spend 2/3 of their time on or near the bottom in an inactive state. And that's from Project Noble Beast. That's Sean Landsman's brilliant study that he did out of the Cook Labs through Muskies Canada here on the Ottawa River. So 2/3 of the time, these super fast, super aggressive creatures are laying down, being docile, and doing nothing. And this fish caught in 1988, 65 pounds, 4 ounces, I believe, is a 30-year-old fish. Muskies if they live a full life, they live to 30 years of age. This is a giant female. All your giant muskies are females. Almost every single fish over 50 inches is a female. If you look at the pictures here, this fish has no teeth left. So she's She's a senior. She's been losing her teeth. She's deteriorating at the end of her life. And she only has one thing in her belly. She has catfish. She has a belly full of mud pouts. I believe it's 33 mud pouts. And that's why she's got this. And if you want to set a record, it's not about how long the fish is. It's about how big the girth on the fish is. And that's why all your record fish come in the fall. Has to do with eating, but mostly it has to do with egg production in the females. And so this is that fall fish, that super fish, as fat as it can be. That was just living on the bottom. And sadly, with all of our giant lures and super musky tackle, this fish was caught on a rapala that was this big. So there you go. So muskies are a bottom-dwelling creature. That's a key point to get across. This is a second slide I like to show to get that across as well. This is a lousy picture, a lousy old picture of a fish from the Ottawa. And every one of those white dots on the back of the fish are lamprey scars. And so this fish was not only laying on the bottom, it was laying on the bottom in a comatose state, or comatose enough that it was allowing another creature to predate on it over and over and over. And in order to make that many marks on a fish, I can tell you that that fish was laying on the bottom for a long time. So I think as a guide that sometimes when you have giant blue sky systems in the summer, things that really turn the fish off, that our big fish a lot of the time are laying on the bottom for 2 and 3 days in a row. We go 2, 3, 4 days in a row sometimes without seeing a big fish. You know the next one you're going to catch is going to have lampreys on it, lamprey scars on it, and then it's been laying on the bottom. So that's a big indicator for us. And
You have a question.
I'm getting a signal to go over here. And if someone wants to make a donation to save a million fish, how can they do it? Wow, that's fantastic. We're not accepting donations to save a million fish per se, but what we do is Muskies Canada and Musky Factory Baits, several of the chapters and the national organization all contributed money towards research that took place at the St. Lawrence River Institute this past summer. Dr. Stephen Cook's lab tested, I believe, over 600 pike to determine if applying Diet Coke, Mountain Dew, or carbonated lake water was appropriate for stopping the bleeding. All of those groups contribute money to the program. And if you want to support the research there, Muskies Canada can actually accept charitable donations and write you a receipt over $20 for any donation that you make. And you can direct that donation to a specific research program. So, wow, good question. Thanks for asking. Appreciate that, Brent. Again, we're going to talk about research later. One of the really great articles in the release journal from this past winter was talking about Steve Kerr, I believe, talking about, not Steve, but talking about the value of research to the muskie world and looking at all the things that have been accomplished and learned and have led to better muskie management and more muskies over the years. And there's a really direct relationship. You can see what the research does for it, and we'll explain to you why now it's more important than ever. I have 2 more photos to show you that are my standard package on behavioral photos. And so this is my childhood fishing partner, Eddie Lalonde. Eddie created river rat spinnerbaits back in the 90s. He was tying bucktails for us from the 70s on, and we caught so many fish on his stuff. And his river rat spinnerbaits that Sam Hill carries on to this day are still one of the best out there. And so kudos to you, Eddie. Eddie got this fish with me. What we need to know for behavior is right here on this fish, there's a transmitter. And that transmitter was put on this fish in 1994 in a telemetry study that we did here on the Ottawa River, our first telemetry study. And the picture of this fish now is in 2000. So Eddie and I had actually studied this fish called Gertha, and she spawned in the back of a bay about a kilometer and a half from where we are right now. And on July 3rd, I believe, which is the day that Eddie's holding her, This fish in 1994 was 100 feet from where it was on July 3rd in 2000. And so that's a critical learning point about muskie behavior. And that critical learning is that muskies want to follow the same pattern every single year. And given stable conditions, like uniform managed water levels on the Ottawa River, they can find where they want to spawn every year. They can spawn in exactly the same place and get really good at it. And then they can recuperate in that area close by, and then they move off to their home range for the summer. And so, and that spawning ground and that home range in the summer are the same every single year, year after year for those fish, as long as the conditions will let those fish do that. You know, let those fish have access to the spawning bed. So this fish was 47.5 inches when it was caught. In 1994, it's 50.5 inches here. So our big fish are growing 1/2 inch a year. You're getting up into the high 40 inch range. 50-inch fish, you're talking about 1/2 inch of growth a year. But the key takeaway on this is that they're in the same place at the same time year after year. And when I say the same time, I don't mean on a calendar or on your calendar. A fish's calendar is a thermometer. A fish's calendar is temperature. And so they're spawning at 55. They're setting up to spawn before that, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, and then they're moving off of the beds when you get to about 60 degrees, traveling to their home ranges, and they'll stay there until that temperature breaks down in the fall. You know, and you can judge it by our calendars on a lot of years, but last year, for example, we had a crazy fall, which we seem to have some crazy periods year after year. And I was fishing with Frank Ungaro at the end of October, and it was still 55 degrees, and we were on a summer pattern. Our calendar said that we should be fishing winter, we should be fishing slow, we should be fishing different, but the temperature of the water said fish fast, fish summer, and we did, and we had success. And so, you know, our calendar, their calendar is a thermometer. Just remember that. And then final piece of key learning, again from Project Noble Beast, and I make a living off of this one. No matter what the conditions, no matter what the time of year, no matter what section of the river, no matter how bad things got, how good things got, the one constant in musky behavior for this study on over 50 fish for the year was there were always good fish and fish in shallow on the good weed structures. And that's important because not catching muskies and not seeing muskies is a big part of what we do as musky people. It just happens, and it happens a lot. And sometimes it happens for days on end. So, you know, how you deal with that is different. If you think that you've got to go and find fish, you got to find a magic bullet of a lure, you got to invent something different. You know, the truth is the fish are where you were fishing. They're still on those weed structures. But how you're fishing for them isn't the way that they want to be fished for. Don't tell your muskies how you want to catch them. Let them tell you how they want to be caught. So if you're fishing fast, that's not the answer. So there's always fish in the weeds in shallow. Going to look over for a couple of questions right now.
Yeah. Mathieu Pigeon.
I see Matthew Pigeon writing in. Thanks, Matt. Fishing in tea-colored water. What were the conclusions of the carbonated cauterizing research? I'm going to tell you about that. I'll give you an update on that probably about 20 minutes or a half an hour from now. And I see Frank Ungaro writing in. Nice to see you out there, Frank. Frank heard me say that white baits for clear water, full sun, what do I toss black and dark colors for? Okay, well, we'll answer some bait questions now. Simple rule for bait colors in the musky world is, or in the fishing world in general, is bright day, bright colors. Dark day, dark colors. Now that's the standard for fishing for any fish anywhere. In the musky world, we have a special adage that's been there forever, and it goes like this. You can use any color you want as long as it's black. And when I started fishing in the 70s, that was it. Black was it. It was black bucktails and black suics. And back then you started one guy fished hair and one guy fished wood. And the black bucktail was a black bucktail, this material. That's a Rob Day. We'll talk about that. Not in that formation, but and a black suic. And you know, that's what you threw. Or maybe a black suic with a white belly, because that looks like a sucker. And you know, to this day, those are still really great choices and still produce most of the fish. A black bucktail in the modern day has turned into a flashaboo bait like this. So it's much less of a hair bait, but it's still the black back, and the difference in the modern day is the two blades together. That double blade configuration, invented by Musky Mayhem almost 20 years ago, revolutionized fishing, because those two blades together create a vortex in behind a bait that a single blade doesn't, and they make the flash and the hair or whatever's back here just stand up and dance. The other thing they do is they put a vibration and a frequency out that muskies just want to chase, and they do. So half of the fish, I think it's over half of the fish that are caught in the musky world that are caught today are caught on bucktail style lures. And in terms of colors, dark or white, the black you can throw anytime. In dark days, I love my blacks. I love my dark purples. I love my chartreuses. Chartreuse and black is a great contrast color for the dark days. But here's one that a lot of people don't get, is on the bright sunshine days, your absolute brightest colors are what you want to throw. And so a bait like this is our Musky Factory baits, black pepper and salt. And this one actually has a bell on it to be a little bit different than all the other baits that are out there, a vibration chamber. But that color right there has been my best producing bait in the sunshine. It's been one of my top 3 producing baits for the last 5 years, every single year. And now I have such confidence in it that I throw it in cloudy days when black and my dark colors aren't working, and that's a ticket. So yeah, I'll show you one other color if I see one here quick. Your true gold lures on sunshine days. Wally Robbins, an incredible friend, writer, an outdoorsman, and musky angler, just a smart guy who thinks things through. I fish with Wally, and when he shows up, it's blue skies, and Wally pulls out a gold bait. We made him a bait, an all gold bait. It's 2 or 3 shades of gold, only gold blades, and he doesn't take that off till the sun goes away, and he crushes on it. So your bright day, bright color baits, that's where you want to go. Hope that answers you for now, and keep the questions coming. Thanks. So the idea for this presentation today started in a hotel room in Pittsburgh 6 years ago. I wanted to do something different on my second day at the show there, and I thought I could write a presentation in a night. Turns out I couldn't, but I thought it was a good idea, and I finished it off, and I was going to take it to Hamilton and do part of it in the Odyssey this year. And so it's pretty simple. It's why. It's asking the question why. When you catch a fish, do you ask why you caught the fish? What other questions should you ask, and what should your takeaways from this? Because this is a learning moment. You caught the fish. Let's learn from this, and let's catch more fish now, because fish are probably biting now, and let's catch more fish in the future. Because when you ask these questions, what you do is you build a pattern. You build a situation where you recognize 3 or 4 things. Clouds coming in later in the day, barometer dropping. Okay, whatever your pattern, you start to put a pattern together. And so good questions to ask yourself. Where was your fish when you caught it? Was your fish laying on the bottom? Was it a suspended fish? Was it moving? Was it on bait fish? Was it on feeding bait fish? Was it close to cover? Was it buried in the cover? Was it on a drop off? And so all of those are key questions to ask, because a big question for musky fishermen is strike zone. Okay, we talked about fish laying on the bottom 2/3 of the time. When muskies are moving, you can catch them. So when you see fish that are following, you're in the game. You're throwing baits that are interested in them, and they're interested in moving around. So you're in the game, and you've got a shot at that. Sometimes you talk yourself in a circle.
There's two questions.
I got questions coming in, and people waiting. So, did your fish move to eat your bait, or did you present right to it? That's a key question to ask yourself. And this days, with the technology we'll talk about in the new fish finder technology, I mean, you can see your fish. You can tell it's a muskie. You can see it and know if it's laying on the bottom or how high up off the bottom it is. And so your opportunity to learn from this catching experience is just growing exponentially because of the technology. So asking yourself these questions just going to help you as you go. How big is that fish's strike zone? You know, if your fish is moving to hit a bait, you've got active fish. And so you should fish fast and cover water. If you think you hit the fish in the head with the lure, or you know that you threw out a fish laying down 3 or 4 times and then you put a fish right on that fish's head and it hit your bait, that tells you a whole lot more information about how you should adjust your fishing game. You know, how big that strike zone is determines the lures you're going to use, the presentation, and how fast you're going to catch fish, how fast you're going to fish. And, you know, again, fishing slow is a big key to catching muskies in the modern day. It's not all about speed. I mean, there is no substitute for speed. Sometimes speed is what it's all about. But, you know, the more we learn, the more slower catches big fish. So why did your fish bite the lure? Was it hunger? Was it aggression? Was it territoriality? Was it defensive because you're just harassing it and bothering it? I fished in Cave Run during a PMTT event years ago, and it was in the spawning season, and I fished it with Mike Spratt, my partner. And one of the big techniques down there was to go and find the fish on the spawning beds and throw rattle traps at them. And they're stocked fish. Americans have a lot of Americans have a different view or place a different value on their fish. You know, because they can grow giant fish in 5 years and they can build a fishery in just a few years. Our fish are 30 years old, you know, and our fish up here, we don't stock. It's all based on natural reproduction. So, but throwing rattle traps at fish repeatedly over and over and over is a great technique. And if you've seen muskies pair up and spawn, you know, they want to be in a particular area. And you throw at them until they give a defensive strike, until you harass them into striking. And so knowing why your fish struck a lure, again, a big part of learning. How was it hooked? This tells you a lot about a fish. If I catch a fish and the lure is in the fish's throat right here, that fish is eating. No doubt about it. That fish is trying to swallow my bait hole. Aggression is on high. The fish are on. I'm going to fish fast and aggressively. If I catch a fish on the outside of the lip or the corner of the lip, or most of my fish, 9 out of 10 fish, muskies, you'll catch on the front hook of a lure. But every so often you catch one on the back. Why did you catch it on the back? That happens in cold water. It happens for non-aggressive fish. And so, again, all of these questions are going to tell you how you should fish. It's all good feedback. So let's look at fish and tell some stories and ask some questions. Maybe before before we do that, I hear some questions coming over here. I see Billy Barber. What's my favorite temperature to fish? You know what, Billy? My favorite temperature to fish is when I can wear shorts and a t-shirt. My favorite month to fish, a lot of people think fall is what it's all about, you know, and there's areas where it is. On the St. Lawrence, you know, September is go time, and fall is when your fish are fat, and so that's what it's all about. July is probably my favorite time to go fishing. It's warm, and Hedrick Wachelka revealed the statistics from Muskies Canada logs to us 20 years ago. Hedrick's a magician of statistics and analysis. Another Muskies Canada guy we owe a huge debt of gratitude to. But Hedrick looked at all the Muskies Canada logs that came in and determined that the most 50-inch fish were caught the most fish caught with the least effort happened in early July, end of June and early July. It wasn't a fall phenomenon. It wasn't on full moons, although full moons produce more fish, but that's because more people went fishing. So the time that produced the most fish was in July. And oddly, that's my favorite time to fish. And just about every year, July is fantastic. Last year sucked for everybody in Eastern Ontario. Bad season, highest water ever. In the spring, lowest in the fall, flooding. July, 5-star, outstanding. So if I can wear shorts, Billy, that's my favorite temperature. And since you said water temperature, I'll say over 60 degrees. I like active fish. Appreciate the doing great comments. Thanks a lot. Couple of nice comments on there. Thanks. So let's talk about some fish pictures and tell some stories. When I was in Hamilton 2 years ago, a new guy came out to a meeting. Two new guys. Caden and Brian Selfie over here. And that was their first Muskies Canada meeting. And Caden had the idea that he was hooked on muskies, but he hadn't gone muskie fishing then. And so we made a date to go muskie fishing 2 summers ago. And we went out for our first day, and man, we fished. Caden is unbelievable. 9 years old at the time, I think. This kid cast, a bait caster, for probably 7.5 hours. I threw one that he retrieved for another hour and a half. We did a full 10 hours out there, and we had 2 shots all day. It was one of those tough days. We lost one that threw a lure on a jump, and then on the last cast of the day, Grandpa hooked this one, handed it to Caden, and that smile on Caden's face, that's $1 million smile for me. That's why guides guide, and the joy that we experience together, just I can feel it right now. And so I got to go fishing with Caden again last year, and again we went out, and this time we got a little one through the day, but again at the end of the day, because that's what these 2 photos are about, we scored this. And so I've had the pleasure of sharing a boat with Caden one day on each of the last 2 summers. This kid is musky addicted. He is a sponge, polite, respectful. He's the way you'd want your kid to be, and I have so much fun out in the boat with you, Caden and Brian. So thanks a lot. And this was our fish this year. And so both of these photos, you'll notice, Caden's got 3 muskies. 2 of them came at sunset. This particular picture has the full moon rise right behind Caden at a sunset. The greatest peak of all the peaks that ever will be peaks is sunset. I make a living fishing at sunset. So these 2 slides are to tell you that if you can plan your day, go and fish the second half of the day over the first half of the day. Magic happens going into the dark and in the dark. So sometimes that 1 to 2 hour period fixes problems. It fixes hard days. It's when fish that have been laying down all day get up to move. And muskies move for various reasons, but two of the main reasons that they move are major light change at sunset and in the morning, and on the moon peaks. When the moon rises and the moon sets and the moon's directly overhead and directly on the other side of the world. And so those were peak fish. 2 out of 3 of Caden's fish came at sunset and on the peak. And this year, I'm going to try and get a bigger one in the day and a bigger one at sunset, Caden. So there you go. Fish the sunset. This fish, there's a bunch of things to talk about with this fish. This is an early season fish. I talked about that fantastic July. Man, June was the worst June I've ever had. I had more charter days than I had muskies last June. So just tell it like it is as a guide. That's a humbling thing to say as a guide. That's never happened before. But we had the flood of all floods. We had terrible conditions. We had cold water. We had dirty water. And the fishing was tough. But when those conditions went away, man, did the fish go. And so this is the first day or two of July, I think. This is Mike Spratt. This is my partner in Musky Factory Baits. Now, you can tell it's at sunset again here. It's just getting towards sunset and a changing light. But that isn't why I put this here. Well, I'll talk about peaks for a second. Mike was fishing with my good friend, our good friend, Devin Ralph, long ago, Muskies Canada member, hopefully soon again, Muskies Canada member, Devo. I like Devo so much, we named a bait after Devo. Got the Devo and the Happy Devo. But these guys went out and fished all day, and it was my day off. And on my days off, I don't want to go fishing. I need to get fresh. I need to be energetic so that I can hunt with a full load, because it's not just driving a boat. It takes all of my energy to go out. So I didn't want to go fishing with Devo and Mike on the day, but I said, you come back and pick me up at the dock an hour and a half before sunset, and I'll go out with you. And so they went out and they beat the river to a froth for about 10 hours all day, and then they came and picked me up. And so we went out on the peak. That's a Mike Lazarus thing to do. Go out on the peak and go and hit a couple of spots. So we hit a first spot, nothing happened, and we hit a second spot, and we had, I think, 7 fish up in 20 minutes. We had 3 of them hit baits, and this one hit a Sonics. That's the bait, our new bait as of last year with the sound chamber in it. And it hit a Sonics at the side of the boat. I think that's where Sonics make a difference. But in this situation, the fish just went crazy because there was a moon peak involved, and because we're on that sunset peak. Now, I didn't put this photo up to tell you about that. I guess if you can't read that backwards, it says sunset, moon peak, and motley crew. So the thing you need to know about Mike and Devo are they only fish with motley crew on the sound system, and not a little bit of motley crew, raging motley crew. All the motley crew, all the time. There are no bigger crew fans. And so this fish is caught, and all those 7 fish came to the boat with motley crew raging on the radio and on the stereo. So my question to you is, does music help your musky fishing, or does it hurt your musky fishing? So let's talk about that for a moment. I asked this question at the Muskies Canada Ottawa meeting in November, and I was really surprised to see the majority of people fished with music, but all the science guys fished with music. I think we got, check my charger connection. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Excuse me while we deal with technical and production issues. Charger issues. Hey, we're still broadcasting. We started late, but we're still broadcasting, and as far as I know, there's people out there listening. So who knows, really? So, does music help or does it hurt your musky fishing? At the November meeting, I was surprised to hear how many people in the room did fish with music. But the best fishermen in the room, a lot of them fished with music on. And the science guys, Sean Landsman, somebody I revere for his research and his passion and his enthusiasm over muskellunge, and somebody who's going to do so much good for Muskies Canada in the future. And we have him here at Cook Labs. But Sean Landsman, Mr. Biology, he fishes with the radio on, playing the good tunes. So there you go. This is also a music fish, but I'm going to admit to people, I'm a caster. You know, I'm a diehard caster. A fish caught casting is worth twice as much as a fish caught trolling. It's just the way that it is. And you get so much joy, more joy out of casting because you bring follows to the boat. And that's something that you don't get to experience trolling. And you don't need to catch a 50-inch fish. If you bring it to the boat and turn it in a circle 3 times, that picture lives in your head. A lot of them live forever. And so you don't get that from trolling. And the other thing about trolling that you don't, that casting gives you, that trolling doesn't, is no matter what you fish for in freshwater in North America, the craziest 45 seconds that you can ever have are bringing that 4-foot fish to the side of the boat, turning it in a circle 3 times, doing it all right, and then having it crush your bait and trying to stay in control. And that you can't get from trolling. So that's why I've always been a caster. But I will finally admit, looking at my log data, and especially with what's happened in my results in the past 5 years, that trolling is more productive. I cast 80 to 90% of the time over an entire season, but you know, there's times when the fish are telling you to troll. There's times when your guests are too beat up to cast efficiently. There's times when your guest will kill you if you make them cast anymore. And there's times when, you know, your guests just want to troll and it's better for them. So this is 2 of my favorite all-time guests. This is Pete and Joyce. They're 77 in this picture here. They fished with me for 4 years, 16 days, 59 muskies, and we troll. And so all the time I have before their trips and after their trips, you know, I'm catching fish. It's a good time. It's in September. I do well in September. But the truth is, I'm not equaling the numbers that I do when I just get out and I do a dedicated trolling day. So this is Pete and Joyce trolling down near Hawkesbury this past September with a big fish. We have intelligent, constructive conversation between Americans and Canadians. We solve the problems of the world. We laugh a lot. And I just love being in the boat with these two, but we don't play any music. And then they go away. And then this guy comes to town. So I have fished with Musky John. He is the greatest musky fisherman out of Jacksonville, Florida ever. He may be the only musky fisherman out of Jacksonville, Florida, which is why I feel pretty safe in saying that. But I have fished with John for 18 years. You can find the funniest video I ever recorded of his father-in-law getting taken away in an ambulance and him asking me to go fishing on my website. So he's that guy. I've used that in a few presentations in the past. And so I fished with Pete and Joyce this past September for 4 days, and I think we caught 17 or 18 fish. Just another stupid trip, 15, 16, 17, 18, bunch of big fish. It was great, and they left. And one thing you do when you're patterning muskies is if it's working, you go do it. If I got an area that's hot, I beat it to death. I beat it till it's not hot, until those fish don't go anymore. Americans have a rule that's different than Canadians. We're spoiled up here. And so we run all over and visit a lot of spots. Americans in general have a rule that says you don't leave fish to find fish. You find fish, you camp, and you throw everything in the tackle box until you catch them. Because if you leave, somebody's going to come on your spot or the fish are going to turn off. So there's a lot of smart things about that rule. So this is my American friend John. And so we are on the same weed bed 3 days after Pete and Joyce were there. Maybe it's 2 days after. And I'm fishing the same hot areas down in Hawkesbury that I've been doing well on for a week. And this time we are raging the music. I believe this is a Tragically Hip. No, this is a Headstones fish. Tweeter and the Monkey Man, as I do recall. John's grateful I turned him on to Tweeter and the Monkey Man. Loves the rock, and we love our concerts, don't we, John, over the years. So I went out with John and his dad, Musky Jack. We fished the same weed beds for 3 days, this time raging rock and roll, and we had a dozen fish as well. So music, no music, I don't think it makes a difference. But I did come to the conclusion that if you're catching fish and you have no music on, leave no music on. If you're catching fish and you have music on, leave the music on. But if you're not catching fish, change what you're doing. Go from silence to music. Go from music to silence. And I could tell you more stories about how that's been a pivotal moment in a day. But alas, we're going to take some questions and then move on to a different topic. One of my favorite fish pictures of all times right here. One of the last real 60-inch fish ever caught. Let's see what we got. DHPD. Oh, not sure. Not sure about that. I think we'll leave that. Oh, no. This is somebody writing in and saying, thanks for the nice comments. Appreciate that, Pete. And Pete says that music catches the fish. He says, noise, I think, does it. He says, I always had luck with catching fish beside docks and with people on them. Yeah. And that's a really interesting comment because, there's telemetry work done on Georgian Bay on post-spawning fish. And one of the neat things is a lot of those big fish went and hung around docks and hung around busy docks where people were, boats were, people were swimming, and it didn't bother them at all. And so, people, my thought is fish that live around boats get used to boats and they feed around boats. And the same thing with all the other peripheral noise that they can experience. If that's their environment, then they learn to hunt in it and they learn to deal with it. And so a lot of external noise, not a big deal. Lorinda Goodman, how do you change your game when you fish in clear water? Lorinda, I have a section I'm going to do in a little bit on dirty water fishing. I used to hate dirty water. Musky fishermen in general are afraid of dirty water. I had an epiphany a few years ago, and I'll tell you why dirty water is now an opportunity for me. It's not something you should be afraid of on the Ottawa. It's an opportunity. Rhonda Pond, thanks a lot. Noah Clark, one of my favorite modern day bait makers out there. I have, if you look over the TV right up here, you can see one of the Clarky baits just up there. And there's one of Bryn's baits, I think, is just up there too. Two of my favorite brother bait makers in the modern day. You guys paint and craft wood like nobody I know. Kudos to you. Noah's question. With high water levels in the last season and likely this year, how does that impact your approach? Wow, that's a big question in general. I'll give you some comments on the high water. When the water is high, you should fish in shallow. When your water is rising. When I fished Cave Run in a professional muskie tournament trail event years ago, I fished with an amazing man named Denny Ortlieb. And Denny called the cave run water management people on there to find out if the water was rising or falling or what they were doing to it, because that dictated everything about how we would fish that day. If the water was falling, we would fish in the middle of, we would fish out off the shore and in deeper water, because the fish naturally retreat away from the shore when the water is dropping. But when the water is rising, your fish love to explore. Okay? When rivers flood, fish swim over dams and go to new areas. And that's how we get muskies in places like the St. John's River in New Brunswick, because they are exploratory. So when you have high water, they have a whole lot more places they can go. And especially in the spring, fish will go into the really, really shallow water. So, yeah, high water, go in and fish shallow, especially in the spring. Peter Van Berlo. Nice. Hope I didn't pronounce your name too bad, Peter. Do I experiment with trolling behind downriggers? I am on the Ottawa River, so when I troll with 3 lines usually. A couple for guests, and the guests get one for me. I troll a short line with maybe 8 to 12 feet. I have another line that's got 15 to 22 feet, and then I troll another line that's 40 feet back, and that's all I have to do. And I told you earlier, I fish shallow, so in general I'm fishing off of structure. I'm fishing in and around weeds or off of the weeds. So a lot of my game is 12 feet or less, and so downriggers don't really come into play for me. If I was on the St. Lawrence, the downrigger would be in play for me on short lines, as would planer boards. But again, it's not a tool that we need here without the clear water. Ryan Pickering, has a guest ever hooked you during a cast? If you haven't been hooked yet, Ryan, you just haven't been fishing long enough. There's some pictures. That's a really great question, Ryan. There was a picture that Gord Pizer sent me last year, and I debated about putting it up on the screen at the Musky Odyssey, because the picture turns your stomach. It's hard to look at. It's a guy from Wisconsin who got a hook in his eye. And the good news of this story is that 5 surgeries later, his eye is okay. But he was netting a fish at the side of the boat, and the fish came unpinned. And that lure came flying out of the fish and caught him in his eye. And so, you know, that was a lesson that when I go to net a muskie, if I'm ever on any of the times I've seen myself on TV or on video, I usually take my glasses and I throw them. Just what I do, so I can, so I can concentrate or see better in the moment. But I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm wearing I'm wearing yellow glasses after dark now because of that picture that Gord Pizer sent me. We don't realize, your musky rods are getting longer and longer. I'm going to show you a new Skix, my new rod for this year. It's 9.5 feet long. Okay? I can reach, with that and a little bit of line out, I can reach the other people in the boat if I'm not careful. And so learning how to cast safely, making sure everybody's on the same page, and having glasses all the time and eye protection all the time. I mean, we wear glasses when we're out there to cut the glare so we can see follows. Good glasses help you catch more fish, help you see and help you find fish. But, along with that, they're a lifesaver. They're a vision saver. So has a guest ever hooked me? The last time a guest hooked, I went a lot of years without getting hooked bad. I probably went 10 years. I had one through my finger 10 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I had somebody lean back on a cast and catch me full on with an inline right here and plant the bone in the hook beside my eye. And it's changed my life in my boat. It has taken away my zen. I spend so much more time making sure that everybody is safe, that people are casting correctly, that casting, if they can only cast on the right or the left, that we're taking safety into account. And I position the people so that we cast safely, and we all only cast overhand. So there's taking your glasses question and the hooking question to a whole nother level. Thanks, Ryan. I hope that answers it. Mike Hauser, do I prefer to troll with braid or mono? For me, there's only one line, Power Pro, or a couple of different flavors of Power Pro. I use 80-pound Power Pro, I use 100-pound Power Pro, and I use Max Quattro, which is a thinner, the new thinner diameter, extra tough super braid that I can get more line on a smaller reel. I'm fishing with the Tranx 300s now myself. You get older, you want everything smaller and lighter, and a Tranx 300 has all the same specs and all the power that a 400 has, but it's smaller, it's lighter, fits in my hand that much better. Yeah. Yeah. So that's when I would use Max Quattro. But for me, 80 or 100-pound test. I'm going to talk about that for a second because I'll talk about St. Lawrence fishing. Lawrence Gunther, I'm going to show you his picture in a moment. Lawrence went fishing in Clayton, New York this year with a longtime guide. They caught a fish on a burger rig. A burger rig is a believer, a leader behind it, and then usually a Williams wobbler that wobbles around behind it. And most people who fish a burger rig fish it with 150 to 200 feet of 25 or 30 or 40-pound monofilament line out behind their boat, and they troll at 1.5 to 2 miles an hour. So remember when I talked about speed, how some musky guys, or a lot of us, think that speed is the whole thing? So Lawrence caught a really nice mid-40s fish with this guide out of Clayton, trolling 150 to 200 feet of monofilament line on a burger rig. Now, that is an effective technique. They don't set the hook. The fish just swims, and the stretch of the monofilament, the hook eventually plants itself. None of it sounds technical. It's not the way that I fish, and why I wouldn't do that or fish with mono or lighter lines is that's not good for that fish. One of the reasons fish die in the St. Lawrence River is because of the way we fish for them. We fish with planer boards. We fish with 200 feet of line, 100 feet out to a planer board, and 100 feet of line going back. And a burger rig with 200 feet of mono out, where you're going to have that much of a longer fight with a fish. Muskies are the toughest, baddest fish in the system, but they create stress faster than any other fish out there. And if you're going to fish with 200 feet of mono for a fish, you're going to have a great fight, and it's going to go on for a long time. But I wonder how many fish you're killing if this is what you're doing. And I'm not telling other people how to fish. The harbor in Clayton, New York, I'm told there's 25 guys who fish like this and going out of that harbor to this day, and this technique started 25 years ago. So it works. I mean, there's people that do a lot of different things, but if you want to treat the fish the best way that you can, limit your fight, mitigate your fight time. Don't take fish out of deep water. All of these are keys to helping fish survive. And one of the reasons there's a problem with fish, one of the more minor reasons in the St. Lawrence, but it's because of the way the fish are fished for, and mono is not a good idea. Wow, lots of questions coming in. I'm going to talk for a second.
Yeah.
Again, if I don't get to your questions, this is just going nonstop. So I really thank you for your enthusiasm. If I don't answer your question today, I'm going to write you an email with an answer to it in the next few days. I promise to do that. So even if we don't get to them now, because I do have a whole lot of stuff I want to try and tell you. Not that I've ever had problems talking about muskies. So I need another sip of kale smoothie. Oh, baby. So this is Jim Hutchings. If you're a Muskies Canada guy, Jim Hutchings is a man that you owe a lot of gratitude for a lot of reasons. He's done so much for the club, for the Gananoque chapter, and for research on the biggest, baddest muskies in the world, which are the St. Lawrence River Muskies. They are the greatest genes that we have. Now, this is a fish that Jim caught fishing with Greg Reynolds. This goes back, I don't know, it's 15 years old now. I lose track of time. The older I get, the more I lose track. But this is a 60.5-inch fish. This was caught on a 13-inch grandma. And Greg's nickname as a guide was Ripper Reynolds. And that's because Greg insisted that his guests hold the rod in their hand a lot of the time. When it was a peak or a good time, or they were around bait fish that looked right, or they were seeing the hook that they wanted to target, and Greg would have his guests hold the rod and rip it when they get near the fish. And that's how this fish was caught. And so that's not a one-off for Greg. Holding a rod in your hand for a long period of time is a lot of work and something most of us don't want to do. But giving your rod a pull now and then isn't a lot of work. Picking your rod up on a peak time, or when it looks fishy, or when your spider senses are tingling, or when you see the big hook on your fish finder in the day, or when you come back around to target the big hook that you saw, because you do need to target those, ripping your baits is a really good idea, and that erratic action will catch you more fish. I'll tell you another story about ripping a bait or using erratic action when you troll. When I fished that PMTT event in Cave Run, Professional Musky Tournament Trail event, we were the lone Canadian boat, Mike Spratt and I. We just went down for a learning experience, to have some fun and to hang out with a whole lot of cool people. And it was all of that, man. Cave Run is just, Crash Mullins and Tony Grant at opposite ends of Cave. It is the Hadfields and the McCoys. It is a real place of eccentrics and a neat place in the musky world. But the guys who were leading the Professional Musky Tournament Trail to that point in the season, I fished around them in some of the pre-fishing, and I saw them during the tournament. And they did the same thing and fished the same places and the same baits and ways as a lot of the other boats. But the difference is that these guys kept their rods in their hands all the time. And they ripped, just like Ripper Reynolds. They ripped their baits and pulled and tugged, and that was enough of a difference in their trolling presentation for them to be the leaders and eventually win the Professional Musky Tournament Trail that year. So if you're going to troll, there's a good piece of advice for downrigger fish and all fish. I'm going to go to another St. Lawrence fish here, and this fish has a few different aspects to talk about with it. One, it's got two of the coolest people I know in it. It's got my good friend and now guide for the Ottawa River Musky Factory, Lisa Goodyear, and it's got my good friend Lawrence Gunther. Lawrence is the head of Bluefish Canada, and Lawrence is an amazing fisherman. And Lawrence is not only an amazing fisherman, he's a blind fisherman, a motivational speaker. He has fished all over North America. He has made documentaries and movies, and he promotes sustainable fishing. And Lawrence, you should go to Bluefish Radio sometime in the next week and listen to Lawrence's last post, or one of his last two posts. I think it just went up last week. He interviews Dr. John Farrell from Syracuse University, a storied fish researcher from the St. Lawrence, on his latest findings. And we're going to talk about those findings going forward. So if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth, listen to Bluefish Radio and Lawrence's interview with Dr. John Farrell. It's priceless, and it'll make your jaw drop. So This fish right here, this is Lisa's personal best. It was caught 14 minutes after the final bell for the Montreal chapter outing in September. There was a 46-inch fish that won that outing, I think, 46 and a half. And this boat, Lisa, Lawrence, and Mike Spratt, they didn't want to go in at the end of the day. Well, they went like a lot of us. They just wanted to stay and fish. And so they'd been fishing deeper structures all day, and they hadn't had any results and any luck. And so they went in to shallow water, to 2 and 3 and 4 feet of water. And when they were messing around in 2 feet of water, this fish swam past the boat. And Mike got a cast at it, but it wasn't interested. And 5 minutes later, same spot, still 2 feet of water, Lisa hooked it. And that's the story of Lisa's personal best fish. So, point of learning on this. I used to go and talk in Gananoque 20 years ago, and the muskie world and what we know about muskies has evolved greatly. And 20 years ago, people thought they knew, they had it figured out and dialed in. But you only know what you know at that time. And the more you learn, the more you find out you didn't really have it all figured out, that there was so much more to learn. So in Gananoque 20 years ago, and for all the talks I gave, I used to say, in the Ottawa River, we catch a lot of fish in shallow, and we fish the mouths of tributaries, and we catch lots of fish. And you guys have 5 tributary rivers right here in Gananoque, and you have all this great structure in shallow. And all anybody ever said was, we troll deep here, John. That's what we've done since the 40s. They did it in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and here we are, and we troll deep. And so nobody would ever have thought. Nobody fished the river mouths. Nobody fished the shallow structure. Move ahead to this time. Here's a fish caught in 2 feet of water in the St. Lawrence River. And there's more and more people casting in the St. Lawrence River now. There's more and more people fly fishing in the St. Lawrence. And I'll tell you, those people are pioneers. And they're learning, and they're proving to all of those old school thinkers, there's lots of fish in shallow. Muskies love shallow water. In fact, from our telemetry study in 1994, we had 3 classes of fish. Fish that live shallow all the time. Fish that live deep all the time. And another group of fish that moved in and out of all of both the zones. And when I say deep, living deeper than 15 feet virtually all the time after they spawn. And so there are, no matter what you think and what body of water you're on, there's fish at all levels, at all water depths in that water. Lisa's, my producer's beckoning me. What do you got? What do you got, Frost?
A few questions if you have time. Some friend that you know from far away.
Okay. It's good. It's good to hear. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and just from the constantly rolling questions, I guess this is working okay. That's good. If this works well tonight for Hamilton and for any of you other Muskies Canada chapters, I'd love to do this with you. COVID's a terrible thing for all of us. People are way more important than fish, but we all need to take our mind somewhere else, at least for some of this time. And when COVID goes away, Muskies will still need our help. And there won't be any government money in the future. And so, talking about it, easing our minds and looking at what we can do down the road, that's what this is supposed to facilitate. Before I go there, last thing I wanted to say about Lisa holding this fish up is the modern muskie angler doesn't look like the old muskie angler. Muskies Canada is like Muskies Incorporated in the States. It's a club that used to be all old men. And to a certain extent, it still is all old men. And when I say that, yeah, okay, I got the playoff beard going right now, and I resemble that remark, It is. But the new face of muskie fishing, because muskie fishing is increasing in popularity. The two areas of fishing that are increasing in popularity are musky fishing and fly fishing. And fly fishing for muskies, a whole world unto itself. But Lisa is the future of musky fishing. There are more and more women taking up the sport of fishing and doing a better job at it than we are, and forming their own clubs and teaching us and driving the research and doing all of that. And the last few years, it's amazing, in my charter business, we have more mothers and daughters, mothers and sons, just all kinds of youth, all kinds of women, young and old, coming into the sport. And so, wow, how fantastic to see this great resurgence. Because, like I said, fishing is on the decline in general. Musky fishing, we're going up like this. And you already know that because you're seeing lots of people out on your spots. I'll look at a question or two here. Let's see what we can do. No trash talk yet. No bad comments. I was sure there was going to be one or two come in, but man, you guys are all saying nice things. Thanks a lot. What's my favorite hook brand? My favorite baits or my favorite hooks? I guess I like Eagle Claws for the most part in terms of an actual individual hook. And in terms of a favorite bait, well, I love Musky Factory baits, but I've been a huge fan of all the Canadian bait makers for a long time. So a bunch of them you'll see hanging around me, and I'm going to actually start a joint promotion program with a bunch of guys. I'm looking to team up with other bait makers, because a lot of bait makers have a lot of product that they can't sell now because of the Odyssey, and so we've all got to learn to sell online. We've got all got to support each other, and so I look forward to doing some cross promotions with some wonderful people like Noah Clark and Clarky Baits and Bryn Roach and Lawrence Bendandy and so many of the really good Canadian bait makers. Question from Lake Nipissing, from Peter Robertson. Enjoying your talk a lot. I don't fish water much deeper than you, but I can get those depths tighter to the boat. I've always felt that like me be more precise around structure. What's your take on that? You know, we troll differently. When you troll shallow water, you troll way differently. When you have planer boards or you troll long lines, your trolling runs are huge, and you line up hundreds of meters away from where you want to be a lot of the time to get through a particular spot. When you're short line trolling and run around, I change directions. I turn baits and run over fish that I see. I turn the boat sharply and I run right next to weed edges. I run over top of weeds and I can see if I clip weeds. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. It's a much more a game of precision, a game of boat control, a game of knowing your structure, and a game of pinpoint placement. You know, when we're trolling shallow, we're trying to hit the fish in the head, right on the edge of the weeds, just a foot or two over the fish. If I'm in six feet of water and I got a bait down 2 feet for a fish that's laying in the bottom, I'm pretty close to it. And so it gives us a whole bunch of other presentation options. That said, if you went and fished with Mike Lazarus, you know, Mike Lazarus, Musky Mike, those guys from Montreal, they are so good at trolling deep water that they can hit a fish laying on the bottom in the head with a bait that's down 18 feet. They know exactly where their bait is, exactly where they're presenting, and how to do that. So, yeah, interesting comment on the shallow versus deep. Andrew Wagger, if you were trolling and marked a big hook, would you troll it again or shut down and cast it? I'm going to go with don't tell the fish how you want to catch it. So if I trolled it and I marked it, depending on what kind of trolling run I'm doing, if I'm doing my typical run short, I'm going to try and pass it 2 or 3 times with my boat if I'm set on trolling. But I'm going to know where that fish is, and if I can't engage it right now, I'm going to come back to it on a peak, on the next peak, or I'm going to come back to it on sunset, especially if I think it's a big fish. You know, if it's a small fish, I'm probably not coming back to it. If it's a big fish, you catch big fish by hunting big fish. So when you see big hooks, you need to go fish those big hooks. So yeah, I'm going to present to that fish 2 or 3 times. I'm probably going to change my depth a little bit. And if I think it's a good fish, I might change my baits and show it a few different baits on the troll. I am more apt to switch from casting to trolling. If I cast an area and I know there's fish and I can't get them to hit, I'll try different baits on the cast. I'll present different ways. And if I still can't engage them, you know, sometimes you just run out of room. They want to follow you for longer than you have, and you can't trick them on a figure 8. So, you know, they can follow as long as they want if I show them a trolling presentation. And so we've gone right back over the same weed bed we cast and caught the fish trolling that we couldn't produce casting. So answer to a couple of questions right there. Hair and wood. I told you earlier how in the 70s when I started guiding, that was it, man. You threw a black bucktail and you threw a piece of wood. And the wood could have been a bobby bait, could have been a suic. That was pretty much it back then. And, you know, that's all that you needed. Suic was my choice. To this day, suic's my choice. So when I go out in the boat to this day, I look at the sky, I read the weather, I read the barometer, I read the moon peaks, and that gives me an idea of what fish activity is going to be like, but I never assume I know. And so I go to places where I think there's going to be fish in weed beds and on good shallow structures, and I cast. And I cast the same thing I did when I was 16 and 17 years old in Muskie in Northern Ontario. I cast hair, only it's flash, and I cast wood, and my wood is still a suic. And so in terms of a presentation, I told you that hair, this catches more than 50% of all the muskies that are out there right now. Both sides of the border, everywhere, this is your #1 bait most of the time, okay? But other baits are better baits at different times, and different presentations are better depending on fish activity. And a suic is one of those baits that lets you do that. So let me grab a suic here and show you something. I teach two standard retrieves with my suics. I like a weighted suic. This is a 12-inch. The bait I throw most of the time is a 10-inch. And if you're only going to buy one suic, this is the color right here. This is all that you need. And this was the same color. That's interesting. Just taken out of the package. This was the same color that I loved as a kid, and it's still one of my most productive colors to this day. So I like the weighted suics. Why? Because the weighted suics hang in the water. They run a foot or two deeper. I can get these down by bending the tail in specific directions. That adjusts the depth that your bait gets down. The more of your bend you have, the deeper you get. And so if I'm fishing in shallow water, in 6 feet of water, I now have a bait with a weight that I can pull and get down 3 or 4 feet. And because it's got the weight, I can pull it and give it action, and I can pause it. And I can just leave it sit there. And this bait fishes by itself when it sits. And that's when it's as simple as it is. This bait was designed, I think, 1929 by Frank Suick. And it hasn't, this one hasn't changed. You know, there's lots of new Suicks, but this hasn't changed. It's still the piece of wood, and it's still the same shape. and it does exactly what it did back then, but it was designed because a wounded fish in Frank's trout ponds tried to swim down and floated to the surface, and that was the international symbol to eat me. Come up and kill me. I'm wounded. I'm hurt. And so that's what this action mimics. And so when I pull this down, one, it's imitating something that initiates a strike to begin with, but two, I leave that bait hang in the water. And so I like to move that bait 6 or 8 feet. Somebody asked a question about tea-colored water earlier. We have 4, 5, 6 feet of visibility. So I like 8-foot sweeps with my bait because I picture it coming into a fish's view and hanging within that fish's view and pausing for a moment. And because of the weight, that bait rises really slowly. And if it's sunny, and there's some clarity to the water, that tail, because when it rises there's a little flutter, that tail is a mirror ball. It's a flash. And a flash to a fish means somebody's eating or somebody's getting eaten. And it says, I should go over and eat that. Or I should go over and get what that fish is eating. So all of these are really subtle triggers, but they work in the fish world. And again, if I have fish that are laying on the bottom and I'm sitting a bait 3 and 4 feet down in 6 or 7 feet of water and I'm pausing it near a fish, I think even with a limited strike zone, I'm in the game. Even if that fish isn't going to get up and be aggressive and chase, that this bait lets me present in that manner. And that's why I like suic. So I present that 8-foot sweep and rest for a second and sweep and rest for a second. And the second technique that I teach with this is just be erratic. To rip it and get a whole lot more aggression and momentum on it. And Todd Leopardi makes one of the best Leo lure, one of my favorite small jerk baits as well. Loved Todd's baits for a long time and used them in the fall. And his bait is a completely erratic action bait. I watched Todd fish it. I thought it was ridiculous how fast and how hard he worked that bait. And that was on Pigeon Lake at a Can-Am event, the last ever Can-Am a lot of years ago. But Todd caught fish when not a lot of other people did on that day, and that was that erratic action. And so that was learning from Todd. And so that's the other technique that'll work with this. Now, I tell you, that's the 2 techniques that I teach with a suic. And I'll tell you about this fish and a couple of suic fish. Dale is 71 years old. Dale's been a guide most of his life. And not a musky guide, so he really loves his musky fishing. And Dale is hardcore. He's fishing a floating, lighter suic than I like, but he's loved his suics for a long time for pike. And so he fishes a Fire Tiger 9-inch suic, a little smaller, and it's light, and it sits up. And he plays it really slowly and just twitches it on the surface. Twitches it down a little bit, but he's way slower than I am. And so a lot of older fishermen fish slower than a lot of you younger fishermen do. And again, fishing fast is not always the answer. And so pay attention if you're not catching fish, and pay attention to what works. And so this was a fish Dale got in the morning on his Fire Tiger suic and his Fire Tiger suic thriller, and just thrilled to death. Gosh, we fish a lot of split days, and it was such a great day together. He caught it with his brother Jay. You know, they went back, had the nap for the afternoon. We were so stoked for the evening. It was the fish of his life. It was everything he'd asked for. You know, perfect trip already in the bag. And then we went out at sunset, and Dale caught this on the same Fire Tiger suic. Fishing slow, not the way I teach it, but fishing it slow, fishing his own technique. Dale got 5 fish on this trip. They were all on the Fire Tiger. I got 5 fish last year with me fishing 4 days on 2 trips. Every one of them was on his Fire Tiger suic. The first fish he caught with me 5 years ago was on it. And so that's a bait that just catches fish. And so it's an older guy fishing slower. I'm not taking shots at you, Dale. There's going to be a point to this. And this is another one. I especially like that pause technique. This is one we got in November. So Suix, this bait went to sleep and we stopped fishing it in at the end of October, or the first day of November pretty much every year. And then the Suix become my primary bait. And this is fishing really slow in November. So I love this bait all year long for so many reasons. And you can do so many things with it. So I'm going to go back to somebody older, catching a fish, fishing different than you do, you fast young gun, reeling in as fast as you can. This is the Handley family. Two of my favorite Handleys. God, Tim, I can't remember your dad's name right now. Most of the Handleys, just about everybody in the Handley family has a giant muskie. They are just a lucky family and some neat people. Lawson here caught his giant fish, his first 50-inch fish, hand bombing it in my boat when he was 16 years old. And this is Lawson's granddad. Gosh, I'm so sorry. This is Lawson's granddad with his first giant muskie. This is a super big fish caught on a sunny day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, if my memory serves me correctly. I don't remember a lot of things in life. I have killed a lot of gray cells, but for whatever reason, I remember every fish. It's funny, you remember what's important to you in life, and so musky people tend to remember all the fish. And so I believe this was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we stopped on this spot instead of going in just to give a few more casts because we were on a moon peak. It was the middle of the day, it was blue skies, and we hadn't seen anything, but we were on the midday moon peak. And this is the bait that caught that fish. Okay, it wasn't a Sonics, but it was a black pepper and salt. It's your blue sky bait, but here's what you want to see about this bait. It's Mag 8s. Mag 8 blades, okay? Much smaller blades and much easier for you to retrieve. And this is an older gentleman who's probably retrieving at half or 2/3 the speed of the rest of the boat because he's comfortable doing it, and that's how he wants to fish. And so I'll tell you right now that in my life, fishing side by side I've been outfished by a lot of young kids and by a lot of people into their 80s who are fishing slower and presenting what the fish want at that particular time. And all you can do in those situations is take that lesson home. Fishing fast is not always the way. That slow presentation, a lot of the time, for a fish that spends 2/3 of its time laying down, works. And you remember I told you about the burger rig? That rig works at 1.5 to 2 miles an hour. And so who does that? Not most musky fishermen, unless you know something. And so there's some learning off of a couple more fish and a couple more points. And we have that dirty water fish coming up in just a moment. So I'll make some comments on that. But let me look back at this. Wow, somebody just wrote in and says we have 102 people watching right now. That's cool, I think. Strangely, getting ready for this tonight made me more nervous than getting up in front of 300 or 400 people at the Odyssey. I would much rather do that than play with technology. So I'm glad it's working out so far. Let's see what we got for a question here. Oh, nothing in the last couple minutes. Okay, so I will keep going on. If you have a question over anything that we just touched on, or any question at all, send it in.
John, there was a question that I don't think you got there.
This one. Have you tried the new Mega 360 type technology for casting shallow? Geez, that's from Sean Brody. Sean, I saw that for the first time. I have to tell you, I live in a bubble. I don't play in chat rooms. I don't go online much. I don't go and do as much learning elsewhere. I have people that I have relationships with, and I learn through them and with them. So I'm in a bubble a lot of the time. I saw the ad for this new 360. Yeah, holy mackerel. I mean, and the new 360, Mega 360, that's going to sit at the front of your boat and give a 360 degree view of what's happening under your boat, out the side of your boat, and ahead of your boat. That's just the next step in technology. That technology was there a year or two ago, but now it's moved into something that's better and easier to use. I went and got a new Helix last year. If you saw the Canadian Musky Odyssey last year, I talked about the Helix. I'm going to show a couple pictures of fish off the Helix shortly and talk about what technology did for me this year. And that'll tell you why you got to have it. It catches you more and more fish. But here's a good question. Where does it go? And so I lost your page, honey. I need your... I need you to fix the phone again, please. So we had a question about dirty water, clear water, stained water earlier. For me, clear water is hard water to fish. Everybody in the musky world know that. Clear water is the hardest water to fish. If you want to do some learning on fishing in clear water, this is the best book ever written on clear water musky fishing. This is Dick Pearson's Musky on the Shield. It is about fishing Canadian Shield lakes, oligotrophic lakes, old water, clear water lakes, lake trout lakes, and it will answer a lot of questions about fish and behavior in those waters that I don't have time to touch on right now. So clear water is a challenge all by itself, and ultra clear water is bad. The Ottawa River is one of the best places on the planet to catch fish on a figure eight because our visibility, our river is dynamic and goes from zero visibility to about 6 or 7 or 8 depending on where you are, but we'll say 3 to 6 is what we have a lot of the time. And that's enough distance for a fish to get a look at a bait, but not a really good look at a bait, and not a really good look at you in your boat while you do your figure eights. Hopefully not with an orange hat and a chartreuse shirt. And so that 3-4 foot visibility mark that we have in the Ottawa, that's why we produce so many fish. And about 40% of the fish in my boat come on figure eights. And that's one of the reasons for that. So, more phone challenges. So in terms of clear water, Muskies on the Shield will answer that. And the St. Lawrence, lots of places like that. The fishing is different. Clear line, long line trolling, where we do short line trolling. That's some of the big differences right there. When I look at the Ottawa, I always look for that 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of visibility. I would drive miles in any direction to find what I used to think was the right visibility. And when the water gets browned out, when we have, this river's 1,300 kilometers long. And so when we get storms, sometimes they take days for brown water patches to get down in your section, and the water can be different colors in different sections. And so I used to avoid the brown water and stay away from brown water until I fished with Gord Pizer about 5 years ago. And Gord asked me, hey, what's in the back of that bay over there? And I said, I don't know. We don't fish in there. And he says, why's that, John? I said, because it's brown water. And he just looked at me and turned his head sideways, the way your dog does when it's confused, and said, really? And I knew at that moment that I was missing out on something big. And so from that time on, I have ventured into the brown water. I no longer fear brown water. And I see brown water. I fish it much differently than I used to. And I see it as an opportunity to catch big fish that you can't catch in the clear water or when there's better visibility. Why? Because they can't see you anymore. because they can't see your boat, they can't see the distractions, and because they're no longer using their eyes as their primary hunting tool. A muskie's secondary hunting tool is their phenomenally efficient lateral line, which runs down the entire length of their body. And from their lateral line, they sense vibration and movement, and they can determine how big something is, how fast it's moving, the direction it's going. And tests done years ago in Minnesota, I believe that even with no visibility, fish still hit baits in the head. I think it was 19 out of 20 times in this control group of muskies. So your muskies still hunt in brown water. Absolutely, they still hunt in brown water. The problem is getting them on the hook, and so you don't have the feedback to know that they're there. Most of us fish, one of the biggest changes I made in dirty water is fishing slow. Because fishing with your lateral line, you don't get on that bait as fast. You don't get an exact idea of where it is, and maybe you didn't get it on your first strike, but it just takes you longer to key in on that bait and longer to get that bait in your mouth. And then the other big change that I've made, both in dirty water and in the dark on figure eights now, is as we get into lower and lower visibility, we do more and more figure eights, and we go slower, and we let the fish find the bait at the side of the boat. And a lot of times there's fish in that dirty water that are there. You just never knew they were there. And they're on your bait and they want to follow, but you did a quick circle and you came out and that was it. So instead of one circle, it's 3 or 4 circles if you're in a good area. And you're fishing slower and you're really concentrating on where you know fish are. So don't fear the dirty water. It gives you a chance to catch big fish that you otherwise probably wouldn't have caught. It opens up a window for you. This is another one of the Handley group. This is Annie. Love fishing with Annie. I've watched Annie learn to throw tranks, get really good at throwing the tranks, and get really good at musky fishing. And this was her biggest fish of her life when she caught it. And she caught it casting naturally. But I talked earlier, somebody said if you see a hook, you go back on it. Yes, I go back on it. And if it's a good hook or a good fish that I see, I go back on it on peaks. And if it's a good fish or a really good fish, I go back on it for days. And the reason is, remember I talked about the key behavioral characteristics at the start. One of the characteristics being that fish are in the same place on their summer home range from 60 degrees Fahrenheit in the spring till the water drops down below 60 in the fall. That's 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks that your fish are on the same spot. So you catch big fish by hunting big fish. And if I see a big fish on a spot, I don't have to catch it to know that it probably lives on or near that spot. And if it doesn't live there, then it hunts on that spot and it visits that spot, because if it's got a secondary range it hunts off of, they run those secondary ranges regularly, and that fish will be back to that spot. So it's knowledge in the bank, even if you don't catch it. So this particular fish, Annie brought it up to the boat, I think probably about 11 o'clock in the morning, and she got really excited and she started figure eighting it, and she caught a couple of weeds on her bait, and the fish just left right away after that. And we fished it with some different presentations, but it didn't happen, and so we went back at sunset. And we caught it. Same fish, same place, hadn't gone far. So when you see hooks, you go back? Absolutely. You see a big fish, do you go back? Absolutely. You catch big fish where you caught them. You catch big fish by hunting big fish. So this is the fish that kicked off the Save a Million Fish campaign I caught with Charlie Ray. And it was a go-back fish. We fished this spot And we didn't get very long in the fog in the morning, and it all left, and the fog went away. And we went to another spot. And then about 20 minutes later, half an hour later, something weird happened. The fog came back on this spot. And it was a spot I wanted to fish in the fog but couldn't before. So we went back to it. And a lot of musky guys run and gun all day. Spot, 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 spot. We covered 20 miles. And, you know, I cover a lot of water too, but if there's good spots to be at, I'll fish them sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day. If it's the right place to be, if my logs tell me there's big fish to be had there now or there was last year at that time, I'll visit it much more regularly. And so this is another go back fish right here. You got to go back. Why is your muskie so fat? You ever wonder why your muskies are fat? I talked earlier about a record fish is going to be a fall fish. Muskies don't start producing eggs. A record fish is going to be a female fish in the fall, caught in the fall, because a record fish is all about egg production, and 1/3 of a fish's weight can be eggs. They start producing eggs in the last week of August, and they're about 95% done by early November. And so all of that extra weight is there. Now this is a fat 55-inch fish. This is Peter George. He's the president of McMaster University. He's on the board of directors for the Toronto Sportsman Show. He is a remarkable, remarkable man. And we lost Peter just last year, just 2 years ago. Just an incredible outdoorsman. But this is a 55-inch fish that Peter caught on July 9th. And as you can see, that is not a skinny fish. That was a 24.25-inch fish on July 9th. And that happens a lot around here. So when you have flooding and bad conditions that persist, like we did last year, what happens when the water goes high and gets dirty? Your fishing sucks. That's one thing that happens. It's really tough to fish in that. Last year's proof. But your muskies end up off current, hanging out in deeper water pockets with every other fish in the river. And you can go and find these off current locations if you're a river fisherman, and they will be packed with fish of all sizes, including big schools of bait fish. And these fish all sit together in the brown water, and you can picture a muskie spending a week, if it's bad storms, or 5, 6, 7 days, in a whole school of fish that just keep swimming in front of it. It's like in fall when they're hanging around a school of bait fish and they get fat. There is as much to eat as they want, and that's all they do, is eat and puke and eat, and hence you get the super fat fish. So that's one of the things we have about the Ottawa River, and especially if we have a bad spring, usually I know our fish are going to get fat really quick after that. Do we have any questions, honey?
You got it there. Yeah.
All right, let's look over here. Bruno, you fish gliders like phantoms. Branco, thank you. Great question. I love phantoms. Rick Pike from St. Paul, Minnesota, taught me to use phantoms in, I'm going to say 2005. And I liked them, and I used them for a while, and then, you know, like a lot of us who collect baits, I got away from them. And then when I filmed with Jim Sarek a few years ago for Musky Hunter, Sarek is one of the best ambassadors the musky world could ever have, and one of the most knowledgeable fishermen. And Sarek isn't just sponsored by the people who make Phantom. He loves a Phantom. A Phantom is a go-to bait for Jim. In any conditions, he will break a Phantom out. He loves his blades. He loves particular colors. You can go see what his favorite color is on Musky Factory bait site if you want. Laid it out as Jim's favorite color. But a Phantom is absolutely his go-to. And in terms of, do I have one here? Look around my tackle room, and I do not see a phantom. It's a red head, and a chartreuse body and a white belly. It's called Sarik's Clown in the fish color world. That's my go-to bait. And when fish aren't biting, when it's low activity time for fish, a phantom is my go-to bait. One of my go-to baits. And the other bait that I go to when fish are inactive, when I'm not getting them to chase, I love the phantom soft tail, and I love the baits with tails. And there's so many things you can do with this, and there's never a bad thing you can do with it. This is a bait that catches fish no matter who throws it, no matter how they throw it, because it fishes itself. The tail does the work. But the key for us, interestingly, your question's great timing, Branko, because I was going to talk about fishing tough conditions and fishing slow. And so this is my friend Mike from Philadelphia. Mike was new to musky fishing, and the smile on his face tells you that this is the biggest fish of his life. So I fished a day with Mike on the first day of a 4-day blue sky high pressure system. And that's a really bad thing to have happen when you're going to go musky fishing. Usually that's what happens when Wally Robbins shows up on the first day of his trip. But Mike showed up, and we had 4 days, and we went out and we didn't catch a fish the first day. But I showed him spots. He was staying in the area and fishing another day in his own boat, and I showed Mike some spots. And he had one tailed bait in his box, but he hadn't fished it and didn't know what to do with it. The first day of a high pressure system is bad. The second day of a blue sky high pressure system is really bad. And the third day, it's less bad because the fish are starting to get used to it. And the fourth day, things are getting better. And so that's the cycle that this goes through. My advice to Mike was to throw his bait the same way that we did and to swim his tail bait close to the bottom. That was it. Cast it out in whatever depth he was fishing, from 6 to 12 feet of water. Set it down near the bottom or get it near the bottom and just swim that tail over the bottom and let the bait do the work. And so when your fish are laying down, a phantom, and I like the phantom soft tail because it's got the rubber tail on the back, and when conditions are tough, rubber tails are an answer. And so this is a suic. This is an old suic from my box, and I love these baits as well. Great alternative for tough time fishing. Blue skies, breakout baits with tails. And so this is Samir. This was his first big muskie as well. And this is a fish that I brought up 2 days in a row. This is the third day that we saw this fish, only we caught it this day. And my guests were from New Jersey the days before that, and I fished with them all the time. Rich and Henry, love these guys, but they only want to do one thing. They only want to throw blades. And if you look at that sky behind Samir, it's blue skies, and it's not a blade bite. It might be. Don't tell the fish how you want to catch them, but it's probably not a blade bite. And so we came and we saw this fish on day one. It lazily followed a blade in, but it didn't want it. It didn't want it, and we saw it. We went back the second day, and my friends would only throw blades. I couldn't get them to throw a bait with a tail. I put on a tail just to try to catch it because I was trying to make a point to them. I moved it, but she didn't eat. Day 3, we came back. Samir landed a shadzilla on this fish's head, a swim bait, and fish ate right away. So blue skies, throw rubber, and you can be pretty sure that your fish are pinned on the bottom just about the whole time on your blue sky days. Remember I said in Project Noble Beast There were two-thirds of the time in that study, we found fish on or near the bottom inactive. Well, when you take conditions that contribute to the fish being on the bottom or decrease energy and activity, like blue skies, like the end of a peak, like current, your fish are going to spend even more time on the bottom. Temperature's your calendar. This is a picture Frank Ungaro took when we were out last fall. God, you take great pictures, Frank. And this is Alex Boutin, Rex St. Pierre, holding that fish. Alex is a wild man on the internet and a wild man to share a boat with. So let me just go back to that beautiful picture for a moment. Maybe pick one more question here. 9:45. Holy mackerel. Peter Van Berlo, what are some of your favorite trolling lures? Because I make a living trolling, I troll my blades. My best trolling blade, my best lure last year was this right here. Casting or trolling. The fish I showed you earlier that Pete and Joyce caught, they caught on this. The fish that John Rutkowski caught right after the Pete and Joyce fish caught on this. This was working. In fact, the fish that Alex is holding in this picture was caught on this. And my point on this fish was caught, I don't know if it was November 1st, October 31st, something like that. And we were speed trolling spinners in shallow water off of weeds, which doesn't make a lot of sense that time of year. But the water temperature was 55, and so the temperature of the water is your guide, not your calendar. That tells you fish activity. So when I'm trolling, if I'm trolling 3 baits, I'm trolling 3 blades. I'm trolling 2 blades, and then probably I'm trolling a crankbait. I love Legend Outcasts as a crankbait to troll in. Sometimes I'll troll a hose fatty, just 6 feet off the corner of the boat on my short line. That's a great body bait. This guy right here. This is one of Noah Clark's baits. That's a fantastic bait. Why? Because it looks like a moon eye. It looks like a shad. Every great musky water has a silver forage fish in it, shaped like a shad or a moon eye. It just is. And the muskies learn to key off of it. Let's see how far along we are. As I told you a while ago, I think, I can talk muskies till the cows come home. So try and speed this up a little bit. Micro spots. This was the cover of the Muskies Canada Release Journal a little while ago. When fish move in the fall, a lot of times you can find a little rock hump or a little log, not on a regular fishing spot, but on the route that they'll take. And I've got a little tree stump I catch fish after fish after fish on every year. And so this fish came off of it, that fish came off of it the year before that, and every fall I go and fish that are traveling find this little micro spot. And it works. All right, technology. I think we're going to switch from, thank you. I think we're going to switch from a kale smoothie, kale blueberry smoothie, to a grolsch. Cheers to all of you. That's a good sip because I haven't had one for a while. So, last year I put this picture up at the Muskie Odyssey and I talked about new technology and what a muskie looks like on your screen. If you haven't seen, if you have a fish finder that's over 3 years old, the world has changed greatly. Your ability to find fish is vastly improved. Your ability to tell if fish are laying on the bottom, how big a fish is, what species of fish it is, are all right there with the new technology. When I put this up last year, this is Andrew Wheat. Oh God! Somebody send in and tell me this is a really great show that I can't think of the name of right now, but this guy does cutting edge things. And when I put this up last year, he uses his imaging to jig muskies off the side of the boat. And it was a helix at the time, and I didn't have a helix, but I said I was going out to get one. So last year I went out and I got one. And it took me about, there's some learning that you go through with it, but it took me, I think, 3 weeks until I said, hey, 24 feet over there, there's a muskie laying on the bottom. And my guest cast 24 feet off the side of the boat and tugged his suic, and the fish ate it. And that was a really powerful learning moment. It was a sad moment for me as a guide in a lot of ways, because I never grew up being a technology fisherman. I grew up learning to read the water and to find spots by lining up islands and trees and dropping lines on the bottom and reading wildlife activity. And so, you know, this is a tool that forces you not to look outside your boat and to read what's going on, but to look at a screen inside your boat and to miss out on what's happening in the water and the birds and the other things. But that said, it is a necessary evil. Mike Lazarus said last year on the panel that he spends his day with a 12-inch screen right here and a 12-inch screen right here, and this is how he spends his whole day. And, you know, I really don't want to turn into that guy, but the truth is we have to. Or if you want to be more successful, you have to. And so the technology, I told you it took me 3 weeks till I pointed out a fish and my guest landed a bait on its head and we caught it. And in that same time period, I learned to identify carp, sturgeon, muskies, the size of the muskie, if the muskie was on the bottom, if the muskie was suspended, how high up off the bottom it was suspended, if the muskie was moving, which direction it was moving in, all of these things. So the questions you ask when you catch a fish that I mentioned earlier, your fish finder tells you the answer to a lot of the times before you even go out there. And so I took a picture of one. I didn't get the idea until right at the end of the season, but you know, this is a bad image of one of the last fish I saw in the year. But you see the forked tail, you can usually see the beak in the head, you can see the gills and the fins on the fish, and I swear I can see the eyes on the fish sometimes. So that's what your new technology does for you. And if you don't have it, you're missing out. You're just not catching as many fish. I'll go back to the 2 fish I caught, I showed you on the micro spot before that. I found that micro spot because Gord Pizer told me 5 years ago to go around your main spots and look at them with your new technology and new eyes, because the detail that you pull off of them is incredible, and things that you see now you didn't used to see in the old days. And your contour maps in the old days, because we thought contour maps were real and told us things that were real, they showed you contours. Your fish finder now shows you the actual bottom, and now it maps and it builds the contours for you. So you learn what's really there you find the stumps, the rocks, the boulders, the little sharp edges that hold fish and make all the difference. So this is what technology does and where it goes. And I'm going to leave you with a comment, and then I'll go look at some questions, and maybe if any of you have comments on technology. I did an interview with a guy named Kip Beef in Minnesota, Wisconsin area last year. Kip's writing a book, should be out about now. Sounds like it's going to be really interesting. Kip and I talked pressure a lot, and Kip blew my mind because we think we have pressure up here, and you think you see pressure, and you see more and more every year, but we don't know what pressure is. Where Kip fishes in Wisconsin, he and a bunch of the guides had got together, and they do river float trips, and they fish a lot of small lakes. And the small lakes get angler after angler after angler that visits them and travels around them in Wisconsin and does the milk run. So they started throwing numbers around, and they had fish that see lures 12 to 14 hours a week. And so we talked about what that might do in terms of catchability. And, you know, fish that haven't seen lures, they eat everything. And then they learn avoidance. And then you need to catch them on peaks. You need to catch them on modified lures, on different lures. You need to catch them on peaks. You need to catch them when their guard is down. Mike Lazarus said something really neat to me a couple weeks ago. He said, you know, John, in the old days, it was so easy. He said, I never even had a follow until the late 90s. They all just ate. And that's because fish that haven't seen lures just eat them. Fish that have seen lures and been caught, they learn to follow. The more pressure you have, the more your fish are going to follow. And the more you learn to need to finish at the side of the boat. So we catch 40% of our fish at the side of the boat, and we don't have a ton of pressure. That kind of tells you the education cycle that they go through. And Spencer Berman, great fisherman on Clare. I interviewed Spencer in Pittsburgh a couple years ago. I said, what's changed? And he said, I used to catch 2% of my fish on figure eights. Now I catch 20%. And that was on Clare. He's fishing open water in the middle, and there's thousands and thousands of muskies. So, you know, even those fish are learning and adapting to the figure eight. So my point on this, on where does pressure go with Kip? When Kip told me that fish were seeing, I'm not going to answer this question, but it's a question that we as anglers are going to have to answer in the future. Where does that go? Because if you can find an individual fish that lives in a bay and find that specific fish and throw lures at it for 12 hours a week until it bites a lure, is that harassing the fish? I don't know. I'm not a PETA friendly. I'm not a PETA person, you know. I've debated PETA people a lot. I love their good intentions, and they do a lot of good things, but you know, in the fish world, there's a lot of misguidedness behind their good intentions. But if you can find an individual fish and present to it and catch it over and over, are you harassing it, and is that ethical? And the technology is getting so good that, I don't know, this is where it is now, and this is Star Trek or Star Wars compared to when I was a kid. So where does it go in 10 or 20 years? And what are the ethics that have to be in place to safeguard the fishery at that point? It's a big question, and maybe a topic for another time and a bigger conversation. question from Dennis Nagarski. I primarily fish the mouth of the Moon on G Bay. Looking to move out from the mouth into open water shoal structures. Any thoughts on lures and depths to focus on in the clear water? Dennis, I'm going to tell you a story about some friends of mine, some truly amazing fishermen. I have so many guests, and my computer works so slowly these days that it's going to take me a moment to pull up a name. But these guys are the Vizendis. Father and son, the Vizendis. Truly remarkable fly fishermen. I predict that they're going to catch a world record muskie in the next bunch of years on a fly on the St. Lawrence. They are that dialed in. Now, these guys fish for everything all over the world. They are well-traveled. They are so good with their flies. They are so good at understanding fish and behavior. And they are relentless in their pursuit. And in learning the St. Lawrence, they come to fish with me and learn some things they can learn some basics with me on behavior and such, and then they go on their own. And I love people who go and learn on their own. You know, they're the pioneers and the people who teach us all new things. So in learning on the St. Lawrence, what these guys did was got the map out and marked all the rock piles and started going around to all the rock piles that in the old days, the Gananoque guys and the Clayton, New York guys didn't think were worth fishing because they were too shallow, and started fishing them. And what they tell me is they're finding fish on a lot or most of the rock piles that come up with deep water around them. And that's not a surprise because, you know, we've been saying that for years, and we've been proving that that's where fish live. And if you can find a shallow structure with access to deep water, that's a fish magnet. So in the St. Lawrence, that is a fish magnet. People are learning it more and more in the modern day and catching fish shallower and shallower. And if you're looking at heading out on the French River or on Georgian Bay or, you know, any big water, yeah, these rock piles are gold. They're just natural habitat for muskies. And let's see if we can pull another question off of here. Oh, my buddy Brent, you're still here. Do you think the vibration from the music may represent the vibration from a school of bait fish that a muskie might pick up on its lateral line? I've heard that theory proposed before. I don't know. It's interesting. A couple of comments on that. Tony Grant, great fisherman from Cave Run, doing great things with Muskie Hunter. Neat to see the fresh blood and the new approaches. Also the wildest man in the fishing world. Tony has some really neat video of him recording schools of shad, gizzard shad underwater. And it's not the video that's cool, it's the audio. Because the noise that school of fish makes when it turns or it gets spooked is way more than you would ever think it is, or way more than you hear on the surface. And so, does the music represent that? I don't know. Another story, I had a guest tell me, a lodge owner who fishes up on, he has a lodge on Great Bear. He drives out to deep water, and before he starts his guest jigging for Lakers, he turns the radio on, and he says that calls the fish into the boat. So, does it sound like a school of fish? I don't know. It's calling a lot of fish to him. He thinks it does in that case. Maybe you're right, Brent. Not sure about that. I was going to talk to you a little bit about Muskie Factory baits, but I think we're approaching over 2 hours at this point. So we have an online store, MuskyFactoryBaits.com. We give $2 from all of our baits to support musky research. We supported the research through Save a Million Fish. We're trying to build relationships with good people and do good things with the money that we raise and the research that we do. Our baits are all inline. We do different things like sound chambers, like striping. This is a bait I released earlier today. We call these heavy metal blades. We have heavy duty models, and then we have baits with smaller blades, hex blades, so they're easier to retrieve. We do these in single and double skirts. We have a new leader coming out shortly, and we make some lure retrievers. And that's all I'm going to say on Musky Factory Baits. Oh, last thing in case people joined us late. Don't want to catch myself. I don't know if we sold this already. I never checked, but this is the Mona Lisa. If anybody wants to buy that, money goes to the Hamilton chapter. Contact me about it. That's our new leader. I don't have one here. I have one out at the factory, but we're doing two things with our leaders that are different. One, we're going all clear, and two, the clip on our end of our leader is expanded. It's bigger, and so if you're a musky guy, you know your leaders don't fit on half the musky baits out there. Our leaders do. So something a little bit different going forward. Save a Million Fish update. The research has not been published. 2 phases of the study were completed last year. Hopefully there are some more phases to come. The first phase involved cutting a chunk of gill out of 600 pike, applying Diet Coke, Mountain Dew, or carbonated lake water to the wound. A sugar-free carbonated beverage, a sugared carbonated beverage, and carbonated lake water. Carbonated lake water was assumed to be an innocuous substance. It's just water and bubbles for those who were worried about pouring pop on fish. The results of the first part of the study, not what we'd hoped to see, not totally different than I expected. In introducing this idea, and when Gord Pizer told me about it, the injuries that we're trying to stop are injuries where the fish are bleeding substantially. Most of those injuries are not injuries where the gill has been ripped. And in my experience, a ripped gill injury is the one that I can't fix or I can't help with a carbonated beverage. A ripped gill is a lot of times fatal for a fish. So I didn't expect good results in applying the carbonated beverage to the ripped gill. What we hope to see going forward is applying the carbonated beverage to the muscles being pierced around the gills, to the back of the throat being pierced, to the vein in the tongue being pierced, to the cheek on the outside of the face being pierced. So Dr. Stephen Cook's master student is coordinating those results and writing as we speak, and hopefully that will go into a scientific journal shortly, and I'll publish the results for you soon, and we'll tell you more about the next phase of the study from there. So there's your Save a Million Fish update. And a topic tonight that I wanted to talk on, because the research issue in December, as I said earlier, was an amazing magazine and a jaw-dropping publication. The value of research in the musky world, we have learned to manage our musky fisheries because of the science and what we've learned from research. The bottom line from the articles done on the St. Lawrence, I'm going to present this situation to you, and it's too big to talk about here, but it does need attention, does need attention soon, and it is very bad. So the research shows this. There's 3 different groups. Dr. John Farrell out of Syracuse University, he's been researching muskies on the St. Lawrence for decades, and he's been looking for young of the year fish on the St. Lawrence for over a decade. 2 groups, one in Ontario and one in Quebec, are also studying young of the year muskies and spawning situation for muskies on the St. Lawrence. The information for the last several years looks like there are virtually no young of the year fish surviving on over 200 traditional spawning sites from Gananoque and Clayton at the neck down of Lake Ontario down past Montreal. So the problem is worse in the Thousand Islands section of the St. Lawrence, the Kingston Gananoque area, but basically it looks like there is 0 success in muskie spawning in the St. Lawrence right now. Why is that critical? Because I'm a baseball fan. I'm a giant baseball fan. I am addicted to my Roto League baseball pool. And I'm not a New York Yankees fan. But I recognize that the New York Yankees are the most storied team in all of baseball. And Yankee Stadium is the most storied institution in all of baseball. And there is so much greatness and so many great stories that have come out of that organization. And the St. Lawrence River is the New York Yankees of the muskie world. It is the greatest of the greatest muskie fishery of all time. The genetics in there are the biggest, baddest muskies on the planet. That's what John Farrell says from Queen's University. That's where more world records have come from. They are the fish we all dream of, and it is the greatest fishery of all time. And those fish are disappearing right now. Muskies live to 30 years old, and the spawn is not happening. And it looks like they have found 1 young of the year fish in all of the research these 3 groups are doing over the last 3 or 4 years. 1 fish, multiple locations, hundreds or thousands of net pulls, 3 different groups. And it, you know, a lot of times in the fish world, we say science guys don't know. They're not good at catching fish. They don't know how to find fish. Well, you know, John Farrell's been catching fish and specifically looking at spawning fish for decades. And the guy's in Ontario too. And so the stark reality is not bad. So how did we get here? Basically, it's a perfect storm of events. The St. Lawrence Seaway, constructed in the 1950s. After that date, we managed the St. Lawrence Seaway water levels for shipping and not fish. So what used to happen is the water would go higher in the spring and lower in the summer. And now we artificially make it go lower in the spring and higher in the summer. And so that's led to some degradation of the traditional spawning spots. And they've all changed. And remember I said fish spawn in the same spot, or want to spawn in the same spot year after year if they can. So the degradation of those spawning spots, we're starting to learn how critical that is to their survival. In 2006, VHS, viral hemorrhagic septicemia, which is a salmonid virus from Europe, came in and killed hundreds of mostly giant female fish in the St. Lawrence, and especially in the upper St. Lawrence River. And the population of fish never recovered after that. And so because we rely on natural reproduction and regular recruitment from wild fish in this system, we've been depleting the number of spawners over a lot of years with degraded spawning sites and less successful spawning, and then we killed a ton of them all at once. And the population never came back after that. The third thing that happened in this chain of events is in 2008, the guys in Gananoque tell me that in their net pulls, they started seeing lots of gobies for the first time. And in 2009, lots of gobies turned into a holy crap amount of gobies. And by 2010, gobies covered the bottom of the river. To the point that today, if you go into the spawning bays in the Clayton area, in the Gananoque area, in a lot of the St. Lawrence, the bottom moves. And the bottom is moving because those are gobies. And so there's nothing that survives in there. The goby population has grown to the point where it eats all the eggs and all the fry. And the gobies are growing to historically crazy big sizes. In the Kingston area, they're catching 12-inch gobies. Billy Barber told me he caught an 11-inch goby fishing walleyes, and that he sees his muskies spitting out gobies now. And so that goes with laying on the bottom, and that goes with a fish that's big enough to get a muskie's attention to it. And so all of these conditions have led to the fishery being on its way to extinction. And so if the research is right, the fishery is on its way to extinction. So a couple of things have to happen at this point. There's a couple of other contributing factors. We let cormorant flocks grow. Zebra mussels made the St. Lawrence clear in 1989, and that brought increasing number of cormorants every year till we let the flocks grow out of control. Thank God there's a hunting season for cormorants right now, and people who didn't think there should be don't understand what this bird did. It's only there because we let zebra mussels get into the St. Lawrence River, and so they're the result of a man-made error to begin with. Their numbers grew out of control, and they eat tons and tons of fish every day all over the river, including your young of the year muskies. Another factor that contributes to St. Lawrence muskie depletion is angling pressure and some of the practices that were used. Now, a lot of the practices, we're smarter about handling fish. A lot of the serious guys have live wells on their boats, but the truth is we fish the St. Lawrence with bigger boats, longer lines. A lot of the guys don't have live wells. They can't release the fish in the water because you can't reach the water from a bigger boat. All of these have contributed to mortality, and there is a bigger mortality rate in the St. Lawrence than any other place I know that guys fish around here. And so it just is. And so we haven't helped that situation as well. And that takes us to where we are right now. And so the question is, what's the hope? There's so many non-positive elements to this story. There isn't really any good ones where you can say this is going to help the muskie population. There's some habitat restoration going on in different areas. We're working to get the spawning grounds back, but what does that do if the gobies are there? And so that ship may have sailed. Species, basically anybody in the St. Lawrence that doesn't guard their nest like a bass may disappear, or travel into a tributary that gobies don't like and can't get established in, may disappear. The pike populations crashed. This is an answer why as well. Crashed about the same time as the muskie population. Gobies hate brown water. So interestingly, where brown water meets clear water, where the Ottawa meets the St. Lawrence, the gobies won't go into the Ottawa. And they don't travel up the Ottawa. And although there's a few been found, very few and far between. And so, there's hope for the fish that travel into the tributaries and spawn in there. And those fish come back out. But spawning on the St. Lawrence, big trouble. Why am I telling you this? Because we have to do something about it. Muskies Canada has to do something about it. Musky anglers have to do something about it. American Musky Anglers and Muskies Incorporated have to do something about this. With coronavirus, there's no money going to be here for the fisheries for the foreseeable future. It's going to have to come from private resources, from money to raise fish to stock, which John Farrell started to do last year when he put the first 6,000 fish in. We either have to learn to stock in Canada in the short term, come up with the money, get through the red tape, convince FMZ 20, the management group, that this is the way to go, get them on board and get it started. And that's going to be a hard thing to do. Maybe it's easier to raise money and give the money to John Farrell if they can raise more muskies in the short term. More research is needed quickly to find out the scope of this problem, to find out how widespread it is on the St. Lawrence. As I said, there are indications that as you approach Cornwall and get into Lake St. Francis and down towards Montreal, it is not as bad, but the gobies are still there. I don't know how it couldn't be. Maybe the goby population isn't as advanced or as big down there. It seems to me it will be. It seems to me this problem will take root there if it hasn't already. So there has to be more research. That has to happen quickly. That's people. That's money. And there has to be stocking. That's people. That's money. It's Muskies Canada. That's Muskies Incorporated. So I had hoped to have some discussion on this issue now. Maybe this is a topic that we can put together some people on and have a talk about in the next short while and see where we go. See how we raise some money. See what the solutions are. But it's got to happen soon. So if you have some ideas, if you have time, if you have money, if you're willing to help on this problem, send me a letter and I will save you as a resource and ask for your help, hopefully in a little while. If you're not aware of this, go read the release journals. The same articles were published in the Muskies Incorporated Club magazine previously, so you can find all of that information there. And maybe at this point, let me pick up and read. Oh, Mike Swan offered to buy the Mona Lisa first, apparently. That's fantastic. Mike Swan, one of my favorite Muskies Canada guys. It's hard to find Mike without a smile on his face. I go out and I share a boat with he and Tom Long, and we giggle a lot, and we tell great stories, and we have a lot of fun, and that's my personal takeaway. But Mike's been contributing to Muskies Canada since I joined it. He provides the Mike the Mover trophies. He contributes money. He contributes time, and he's doing it again. Thanks, Mike. Love it. Rex St. Pierre, how would you put the Larry ahead of the G-Bay in terms of genetics? The G-Bay, the Georgian Bay? See, G-Bay can also mean Green Bay to me in the modern day. And Green Bay, Wisconsin, is one of the greatest big fish fisheries in the modern day. And the neat thing about it is it's a built fishery because we gave them the genes from Georgian Bay to put into the Wisconsin, into the Green Bay area. And those fish have taken off like gangbusters. They have a huge population and they're growing to huge size. And there's guides there catching crazy numbers of giant fish. So the genetics in Green Bay genetics in Georgian Bay and the genetics in the St. Lawrence are the two greatest sets of musky genes on the planet. Dr. John Castleman from Queen's University said the fastest, after post VHS, the fastest growing muskies with the largest growth potential on the planet were in the St. Lawrence. That previously they had been in Georgian Bay, but because of VHS, nature's way of dealing with what they lost, maybe, they were growing. They were growing. So they were the fast. So that's the best genes in the world. Noah Clark also really wanted that bait. All right. Same guy stepping up over and over. I love it. I love it. If anybody's got a last question or two, send it in now. When you're sitting in your basement by yourself, talking to yourself, because my beautiful wife France left quite a while ago. You don't really understand the scope of what we've done, how far-reaching it is, or how successful is what it is. But I will hopefully grasp that after. Hopefully learn to do this better, and hopefully do a whole bunch more of these going forward if you guys want to, if the others Muskie Canada chapters want to, and if there's other topics that people want to talk about, you know, we can do those as well. So it's been a privilege and a pleasure to share time with you all this evening. And so I'll leave you with that and say thank you. That's one of my favorite fish pictures from last year. My good friend Peter Levick took that photo. I've watched Peter learn to become a better and better musky fisherman every year. I love his passion. I love what he does. And he, more than anyone I know, has given more of his life and his time to Muskies Canada. So thank you, Peter, for everything that you did. Thanks for this picture. Thanks for working with me at the Ottawa River Muskie Factory for all these years. Continued success, and I look forward to growing old with you and telling stories and jokes. Noah sends in big round of applause, so I will give you all a big round of applause back. I guess we all got to go to bed at some point. gotmusky@gmail.com. You can find me on the internet very easily. Send me a question anytime. I get back to just about everybody with answers. I'll answer you with your questions from this evening. It's been a blast hanging out with you in my basement. Now go away.